We are witnessing a historic severe weather event unfold right now across the greater Los Angeles area in the form of these wildfires. It is not often while an event is still unfolding that you realize the gravity of it and the historical implications that are going to occur from it. In the wake of these fires, there is going to be a local housing crisis, there are going to be long-term health consequences, there's going to be political fallout, all sorts of things like that over the coming years. And that is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the aftermath of an event of this scale. The purpose of this video today is to talk about wildfires and the messaging that can happen before them. Wildfires and fires in general are something that I personally loathe. My distaste for them I can trace back to a single catalyst event, and that being a first grade fire safety assembly with one of the town fire lieutenants, and he put in this 90s VHS documentary on the TV cart that you used to have in your classroom with the VHS you used to have movie days on. And that had a story of a kid kicking over a candle and basically his house going up into an inferno in a matter of minutes. And that stuck with me so severely that I had reoccurring nightmares of fires burning down my childhood home consistently throughout my childhood, to the point where I would routinely check candles in my house to make sure they were blown out before I went to bed. Fires have been something that have really irked me in years past. Thankfully, though, I've grown out of that fear. I did scouting and have made plenty of campfires and stuff like that, and kind of learned the respect of fires. And while learning how to make fire and stuff like that, you learn about the fire triangle, right? Where you have the three pillars you need to make a fire. You have your fuel, you have your oxygen, and you have your heat source. And when it comes to wildfires, specifically this Los Angeles event, all of those things came together starting months ago. As I alluded to, several months back, there was a lot of rain in California, unprecedented levels of rainfall. And with that rainfall, you get extensive vegetation growth. But over time, that rain doesn't persist and things begin to dry out, that including the new vegetation you just grew. As all this stuff dries out, you basically have a bunch of kindling lying on the ground. And when it comes to Southern California, home of the Santa Ana winds, this is where your oxygen component comes for your fire triangle. Routinely over the Great Basin, which is Nevada, Utah, that region of the country, you get a persistent high pressure system that is constantly forcing dry air over the Sierra Mountains and down over coastal California. These Santa Ana winds can get very strong when you have an interacting low pressure system, and in this case, we had the persistent Great Basin high interacting with a strong low that was forming over the Baja California Peninsula. So really strong northerly winds coming from the north, south, bringing all of this dry air with it and at a very fast pace. So all that's left is your heat source to complete your fire triangle. And with these very strong Santa Ana winds, you can provide that very easily by knocking over a couple power lines, or if someone's negligent enough to do so, a cigarette out of the window will be more than enough to get a fire roaring. This brings me all back to the main point that I want to drive home. Wildfires are severe weather, but in the eyes of most people, they are kind of a pseudo severe weather. Things like tornadoes and hurricanes are much more tangible under that severe weather category, whereas wildfires are a little bit different. The conditions surrounding them aren't that typical severe weather, sphere that we typically associate it with, if that makes sense. Therefore, wildfires do not get the same level of communication before a threat occurs for a variety of reasons. Forecasting severe weather comes at the hands of the National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center, the SPC. It's something that I talk about all the time on the channel, and an underappreciated arm of the SPC is its fire outlook forecasts. What's currently unfolding in Los Angeles was well forecasted by the NWS SPC and the local office of the Los Angeles National Weather Service, WFO. The fire weather outlooks had highlighted the Los Angeles area days in advance, and the day before the Santa Ana winds really kicked up, the local Los Angeles NWS office issued a particularly dangerous situation red flag warning, which is the first time that has ever been done in history as far as I'm aware. Having a great forecast is great and all, but if you cannot effectively communicate the threat, what good is it to have a good forecast? And that is where someone like me, a social media weather communicator, I have to take a little bit of onus here, but I think a lot of my peers do as well, where we're coming into this new age of severe weather communication, and the focus has obviously been pointed at a lot of other types of severe weather events because they are much more tangible. Things like tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, those types of things are well-perceived severe weather threats, whereas things like wildfires, and I would also throw excessive rainfall events under this category as well, where they're a little more pseudo in the sense where they're not the traditional severe weather event that you would typically associate with needing extensive pre-warning messaging. Wildfire conditions on paper are fairly boring. Yeah, you have really dry air, some fast-moving winds. Okay, sure, that's kind of interesting, but from a meteorological perspective, it's rather boring. The same can be said for excessive rainfall events where it's just a bunch of stratiform rain and flash flooding. It's just a lot of rain being dumped on one place at one time. They don't have the same intricacies as a tornado outbreak, for example. On behalf of weather communicators, it is much easier to communicate the threat of tornadoes, hurricanes, blizzards, and they're way more marketable. It's much more difficult to be like, hey, there might be some fire conditions in this area today, and it's really easy to be like trying to market that and kind of play it up to make it seem like something is really bad with wildfires and then for there nothing to happen. But oftentimes when there are extreme conditions for a fire, all it needs is a spark and a fire ignites. So I invite myself and other weather communicators, while I'm not a serious weather forecasting YouTuber, for example, but there are a bunch of us in this space that can make a more concerted effort of communicating threats like wildfire conditions or excessive rainfall conditions where flash flooding can be a significant hazard, that we should be putting a lot more effort into warning those types of events because they are obviously high impact type of events. I'm proposing that we put as much effort into communicating fire forecasts as we do a tornado outbreak forecast, for example. While the two aren't necessarily super comparable on paper, just putting the same amount of effort into disseminating the information could go a long way into helping keeping people prepared for an event like that in the future, especially on the West Coast or even in areas of the Great Plains where brush fires are a common occurrence. And the messaging when it comes to tornado outbreaks is far more abundant and far easier to get out there than fire weather hazards are. And I think we need to make a more concerted effort to putting them on the same pedestal in order to get the messaging out to the people that need it. I know that I want to make an effort in trying to make the weather communication space a better place, and I'm going to be sure to start disseminating information on my socials when it comes to severe weather forecasts that don't just pertain to tornadoes and hurricanes and blizzards. There's things like wildfires and excessive rainfall events that are underappreciated and frankly claim a lot more property and lives, especially flash flooding, at the end of the day. So it's those types of events that need a more focused effort in order to get the point across to the people that need to hear it. Stay strong, LA. We're thinking about you, and hopefully we can, provide the help that will be needed in the coming weeks, months, and years.